Mike pulled his suitcase off the baggage carousel, the wheels squeaking faintly as he walked toward the airport exit. His business trip to Chicago had ended 2 days earlier than planned, a rare win in his demanding career as a corporate strategist. He hadn't told his wife, Emma, about his early return. Instead, he thought it would be a fun surprise for her and their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The cab ride home was uneventful, the driver chatting about the latest local sports team's triumphs. Mike nodded along, his mind wandering to the cozy image of Emma's face lighting up when she saw him. They had been married for 9 years, and although life had thrown its fair share of challenges their way, Mike believed their bond was unshakable. When the cab pulled into his quiet suburban street, the house loomed ahead, its lights glowing softly against the evening sky. Mike paid the driver and stepped out, excitement bubbling in his chest. But as he approached the driveway, a strange unease crept over him. There was an unfamiliar car parked out front. Mike frowned, gripping his suitcase handle tightly. The car, a sleek silver sedan, wasn't one he recognized. A friend's car? A client of Emma's? She occasionally worked freelance as an interior designer, though she rarely brought clients to the house. Shrugging off the unease, Mike decided to let himself in quietly. Maybe Emma was hosting a surprise of her own, dinner with friends, perhaps. He fished his keys from his pocket and unlocked the door as silently as possible. The living room was dim, lit only by the flicker of the TV. The sound of Lily's favorite cartoon echoed faintly, but the room was empty. Mike placed his suitcase by the door and took a step further inside, calling out softly, "Emma? Lily?" There was no response. His pulse quickened as he walked toward the staircase. That's when he heard it, a muffled laugh from upstairs. A man's laugh. Mike froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. But then the sound came again, louder this time, followed by Emma's familiar giggle. A sound he knew intimately. A sound that used to be just for him. Adrenaline surged through Mike's veins, and he crept up the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest. As he reached the landing, the laughter stopped, replaced by the low murmur of voices. The sound was coming from the bedroom, their bedroom. Mike's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. Slowly, he turned it and pushed the door open an inch, peering inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her hair tousled, wearing a robe Mike didn't recognize. Beside her, a man, broad-shouldered with neatly styled hair, leaned back against the pillows, a relaxed smile on his face. They weren't touching, but the intimacy between them was undeniable. Mike's mind raced, trying to process the scene. The man said something in a low voice, and Emma laughed again, her cheeks flushed. It was the kind of laugh she used to reserve for Mike when they were newlyweds. Unable to stay silent any longer, Mike pushed the door open fully. "Emma." Her name cut through the air like a whip. Emma's head snapped around, her eyes wide with shock. The man bolted upright, his face draining of color. "Mike." Emma stammered, clutching the robe tighter around herself. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Mike said, his voice low and trembling with barely controlled anger. His eyes shifted to the man. "Who the hell is this?" The man stood, hands raised defensively. "Look, I think I should go." "You think?" Mike barked, stepping into the room. "Start talking, or I'll make sure you regret ever stepping foot in this house." "Mike, please, calm down," Emma pleaded, her voice breaking. "This isn't what it looks like." Mike let out a bitter laugh. "Really?" "Because it looks pretty clear from where I'm standing." The man edged toward the door, clearly eager to escape. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "Too late," Mike snapped, stepping aside to let him pass. The man slipped out of the room without another word, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. Once they were alone, Mike turned back to Emma, his chest heaving with a mix of rage and betrayal. Start explaining. Now. Emma swallowed hard, her eyes shimmering with tears. Mike, it's not. I mean, we weren't. Don't lie to me. Mike shouted, his voice cracking. I just walked in on you laughing in bed with another man. Do you think I'm stupid? Emma buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Mike stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. So it did happen, he said coldly. How long? She looked up, her face pale. Mike, How long, Emma? He demanded, his voice quieter but no less furious. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, a few months. The room spun. Mike stumbled back, gripping the doorframe for support. He had expected her to deny it, to claim it was a misunderstanding. But the truth was worse than he had imagined. Why? He asked hoarsely. Why would you do this? Emma's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Her silence spoke volumes. Mike stood frozen, Emma's confession reverberating in his mind like an echo in an empty canyon. His wife, his partner of 9 years, the mother of his child, had been unfaithful for months. The revelation felt surreal, as if he had stepped into someone else's nightmare. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. Her muffled sobs filled the tense silence between them. But Mike didn't feel pity or sadness, only anger and the sharp sting of betrayal. Who is he? Mike asked, his voice cold and clipped. Emma shook her head without looking up. It doesn't matter. Mike's temper flared. It matters to me, Emma. I deserve to know who's been sneaking around with my wife in my own house. She hesitated, then whispered, his name is Jason. Mike clenched his fists. He didn't recognize the name, but that only deepened the sense of betrayal. How many lies had she told? How much of their life together had been a facade? Without another word, Mike turned and left the room, heading downstairs. Emma's frantic footsteps followed him, her voice trembling as she called after him. Mike, wait. Please, let me explain. He stopped at the base of the stairs and turned to face her. Explain? You mean tell me how you thought it was okay to bring some guy into our home while I'm away working for us? Go ahead, Emma. I'd love to hear it. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. It's not that simple. Mike's laughter was bitter. Oh, it seems pretty simple to me. You cheated. You lied. And you didn't even have the decency to hide it well enough to spare me the humiliation. Emma opened her mouth to respond but seemed to think better of it. She sank onto the bottom step, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Mike grabbed his suitcase from the entryway and stormed into the living room. He needed space to think, to breathe, but the house suddenly felt suffocating. Everywhere he looked, there were reminders of their life together, framed family photos on the mantel, Lily's toys scattered across the floor, the throw blanket Emma had knit during their first year of marriage. All of it felt tainted now. Emma followed him hesitantly, keeping her distance. Mike, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said quietly. But I love you. I made a mistake. Mike cut her off, his voice sharp. A mistake? A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. You don't accidentally carry on a months-long affair, Emma. I know, she admitted, her voice trembling. I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me right now. But I need you to understand. What? Mike interrupted, spinning to face her. What could possibly justify this? Emma flinched, as if his words had physically struck her. She hesitated, then said softly, I felt alone. You've been so busy with work, and I know you're doing it for us, but I felt like I didn't matter anymore. Jason, he listened to me when I needed someone. Her explanation hit Mike like a slap. "So this is my fault now," he said, his voice rising. "I work hard to provide for this family, and you repay me by throwing it all away for some guy who listened?" Emma's tears flowed freely, but she didn't answer. Her silence infuriated him even more. Mike grabbed his car keys. "I can't do this right now. I need some air." "Mike, please," Emma begged, rising to her feet. "Don't go. Let's talk about this." He shook his head. "We've done enough talking for one night." Without waiting for her response, Mike walked out the door, slamming it behind him. The cool night air hit him like a shock, but it wasn't enough to calm the storm inside him. He got into his car and drove aimlessly, the dark streets blurring past as his mind raced. Mike eventually found himself parked at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. He went inside, ordered a cup of coffee, and sat in a corner booth, staring blankly at the steaming mug in front of him. His thoughts were a tangled mess of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. How had things gotten to this point? He thought back to the early days of their relationship, when he and Emma had been inseparable. They'd faced challenges before, but he had always believed they could overcome anything together. Now, that belief felt naive. "Hey, you okay?" a waitress asked, interrupting his thoughts. She was young, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Mike forced a nod. "Yeah. Just a long night." She didn't press further, leaving him to his thoughts. As he sat there, Mike's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Emma. "I'm sorry. Please come home. We need to talk." He stared at the message for a long time, torn between his anger and the lingering love he still felt for her. He couldn't ignore the fact that they had a daughter to think about, and the thought of Lily waking up to find him gone tugged at his heart. With a heavy sigh, Mike paid for his coffee and left the diner, heading home. When he walked through the door, Emma was sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up as he entered, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I'm here for Lily," Mike said flatly, heading toward the stairs. "Mike," Emma called after him, her voice breaking. "I know you're hurt, but please, don't shut me out completely." He stopped but didn't turn around. "You already shut me out, Emma. I'm just returning the favor." With that, he climbed the stairs, leaving her alone in the silence of their broken home. The following morning was uncomfortably quiet. Mike woke early and went to check on Lily. She was still asleep, her tiny figure curled beneath a rainbow-patterned blanket. For a brief moment, the sight of her brought him peace. But as soon as he left her room, the weight of the previous night came crashing back down. Emma was in the kitchen, making breakfast. She glanced up when Mike entered, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice tentative. Mike didn't respond. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, avoiding her gaze. "Mike," she began hesitantly, I know there's nothing I can say to fix this, but I want you to know how sorry I am." Mike looked at her, his expression hard. "Sorry doesn't undo what you did." "I know," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you." "What happened with Jason?" "Don't," Mike cut her off sharply. "Don't say his name. Don't even talk about him." Emma nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay." The sound of tiny footsteps interrupted them as Lily entered the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, running toward him. Mike forced a smile and scooped her up. "Hey, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're home early." "Yeah," Mike said, his voice softening. "I missed you, so I came back to see you." Lily grinned, but Emma looked away, guilt etched into her features. Mike set Lily down and helped her get ready for school, focusing all his energy on his daughter. He avoided Emma for the rest of the morning. After dropping Lily off at school, Mike decided to take a walk to clear his head. The neighborhood felt quiet and still, but inside, Mike's emotions churned like a storm. He couldn't stop replaying Emma's confession in his mind, each detail like a fresh wound. How could she betray him? And for Jason, of all people, a man who had no right to step into their lives. Mike found himself at a nearby park, sitting on a bench near the playground. He watched as other families laughed and played, their happiness feeling like a cruel contrast to his own turmoil. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen, debating whether to call someone for advice. His best friend, Eric, had always been his sounding board, but this situation felt too personal to share. Yet, Mike knew he couldn't navigate this alone. "Hey, man," Eric's voice came through the line after a few rings. "What's up?" "Eric," Mike said, his voice heavy, "I need to talk." Eric immediately picked up on the seriousness of Mike's tone. "What's going on?" Mike hesitated, then said, "It's Emma. I came home early from my business trip, and I caught her with another man." The line went silent for a moment. "What?" Eric finally said, his voice a mixture of shock and anger. "Are you serious?" "Yeah." She admitted it's been going on for months. "Mike, I'm so sorry, man. That's awful." Mike leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I don't know what to do, Eric. Part of me wants to pack my things and leave, but then there's Lily. I don't want her to grow up in a broken home." Eric sighed. "It's a tough situation, no doubt. But you need to think about what's best for you, too. If you're not happy, staying just for Lily won't help anyone." "I know," Mike said quietly. "But it's not that simple." When Mike returned home, Emma was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as he entered, her expression hopeful but wary. "Mike," she said cautiously, "can we talk?" Mike crossed his arms, staying near the doorway. "What do you want to say?" Emma hesitated, then said, "I want to explain. I know I've hurt you, and I know you might never forgive me, but I need you to understand why this happened." Mike clenched his jaw. "I already know why. You felt neglected, so you found someone else to make you feel important." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't deny it. "I know that doesn't excuse what I did. I made a terrible choice, and I regret it more than I can say. But Mike, I still love you. And I want to fix this." Mike scoffed. "Fix this? How do you fix breaking someone's trust?" "I don't know," Emma admitted, her voice breaking. "But I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off all contact with Jason. Just, please don't give up on us." Mike stared at her, his emotions a tangled mess. Part of him wanted to believe her, to hold on to the life they had built together. But another part of him, the part that felt raw and betrayed, wasn't sure if he could ever look at her the same way again. "I need time," he said finally. "I can't make any decisions right now." Emma nodded, relief mingling with her tears. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." That night, as Mike lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling, his thoughts spinning. Was there a way to salvage their marriage? Or had Emma's betrayal destroyed everything beyond repair? The answers felt as distant as the stars outside his window. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The days after Mike's decision to take time were tense and filled with a delicate, unspoken truce. Emma tiptoed around the house, trying not to upset him further, while Mike buried himself in work and his responsibilities with Lily. Every interaction between them felt forced, a thin layer of civility masking the deep emotional rift. Mike often caught Emma watching him with a mixture of hope and despair, but he avoided her gaze. He wasn't ready to have the conversations she clearly wanted. For now, His focus was on regaining some semblance of normalcy, even if normal felt like a distant memory. One evening, as Mike was helping Lily with her homework at the dining table, Emma approached hesitantly. "Mike," she said softly, "can we talk after Lily goes to bed?" Mike glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Fine." Emma gave a small nod and left the room, her retreating footsteps echoing in the quiet house. Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't sure he had the energy for another emotionally charged conversation, but avoiding it forever wasn't an option. Later that night, after tucking Lily into bed, Mike found Emma waiting for him in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. He sat across from her in the armchair, leaning back and crossing his arms. "What do you want to say?" Emma took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I know I've already apologized, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry, Mike. For everything. I betrayed your trust, and I hurt you. I'll never forgive myself for that." Mike said nothing, his expression hard. Emma pressed on. "I've cut off all contact with Jason. I told him it was over, and I blocked him on everything. I even deleted my social media accounts to make sure he couldn't reach me." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Why now? Why not months ago, before it got to this point?" Her shoulders slumped. "Because I was selfish. I was caught up in my own feelings, and I didn't think about the damage I was doing. But I'm thinking about it now. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm committed to fixing this." Mike let out a bitter laugh. "You say that like it's easy. Like we can just slap a bandage on this and move on." "I know it's not easy," Emma said, her voice breaking. "But I'm willing to put in the work. I love you, Mike. I love our family. And I don't want to lose you." Mike looked away, his jaw tightening. "Love isn't enough, Emma. Trust is what makes a marriage work, and you shattered it." Emma wiped at her tears, nodding slowly. "You're right. And I know it'll take time to rebuild it. But I'm not giving up. I can't give up." The days that followed were filled with small but noticeable changes in Emma's behavior. She became more attentive to Mike and Lily, taking on tasks that Mike usually handled, like picking Lily up from school or helping her with homework. She also started therapy on her own, a step suggested by their marriage counselor. Mike appreciated her efforts but couldn't shake the lingering bitterness. Her actions, while admirable, felt too little, too late. The image of her sitting on their bed with Jason was burned into his memory, a constant reminder of her betrayal. One evening, Mike received an unexpected text from Eric. "You busy? Need to talk?" Mike called him immediately. "What's up?" "Man, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," Eric said, his tone serious. "But I ran into someone at the gym today." "Jason." Mike's grip on the phone tightened. "What?" "Yeah. He was talking to one of the guys I know. I overheard him mention Emma." Mike's heart pounded. "What did he say?" Eric hesitated. "It wasn't much. Just something about how she's probably already moved on." I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but it sounded like he was bitter. Mike's jaw clenched. "Thanks for telling me." "No problem," Eric said. "Just thought you should know." Mike ended the call and sat in silence, his mind racing. Jason's words gnawed at him. Had Emma truly ended things? Or was Jason's bitterness a sign that she was still in contact with him? That night, as Emma was cleaning up after dinner, Mike confronted her. "I heard something interesting today," he began, his voice cold. Emma looked up, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" "I heard that Jason's been talking about you," Mike said, watching her reaction closely. "Care to explain?" Her eyes widened, and she set down the dish she was holding. "I don't know what he's been saying, but I haven't spoken to him. I swear. Mike narrowed his eyes. Are you sure? Because I'm not in the mood to be lied to again. Emma stepped closer, her expression earnest. Mike, I blocked him on everything. I haven't seen or spoken to him since I ended it. I promise you. Mike studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he nodded, though the doubt still lingered. The following week, Mike decided to dig deeper. He wasn't proud of it, but he checked Emma's phone while she was in the shower. Her call logs and messages showed no signs of contact with Jason. Still, Mike couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. Later, he drove to Eric's gym, hoping to catch Jason there. He wasn't sure what he planned to do if he saw him: demand answers, maybe, or simply size up the man who had nearly destroyed his family. But Jason wasn't there. And as Mike sat in his car, staring at the gym's entrance, he wondered if he was spiraling. Was his need for answers blinding him to the progress Emma was trying to make? When Mike returned home that evening, Emma greeted him with a tentative smile. "How was your day?" Mike hesitated, then said, "It was fine." For the first time in weeks, he let her hug him. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Mike's hug, though brief and hesitant, seemed to spark a fragile hope in Emma. She became even more dedicated to proving her sincerity, going above and beyond to demonstrate her commitment to repairing their relationship. She volunteered for every therapy session with unflinching resolve, her words honest and raw. Yet, despite her efforts, Mike's heart remained guarded. The specter of Jason lingered, an invisible presence in their home. Mike couldn't escape the memories or the questions that gnawed at him. Had Emma told him everything? Was there more she was hiding? And what if Jason decided to reappear? One afternoon, while working from home, Mike's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hesitating briefly, he answered. "Hello." A male voice on the other end made his blood run cold. "Mike, this is Jason." Mike's grip tightened on the phone. "What the hell do you want?" "I'm not calling to cause trouble," Jason said quickly, his tone defensive. "I just thought you should know something. Emma's been trying to keep things clean, but she hasn't told you everything." Mike's chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" Jason hesitated, then said, "She didn't tell you we went to that cabin, did she? The one you guys stayed at for your anniversary last year?" The words hit Mike like a punch to the gut. His mind raced as he tried to process what Jason had just said. "You're lying," he said, though his voice faltered. "Believe what you want," Jason said coolly. "But you should ask her about it. I think you deserve the truth." Jason hung up before Mike could respond, leaving Mike gripping the phone with trembling hands. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, confusion, betrayal. Was Jason trying to sabotage their efforts at reconciliation, or was there truth in his words? When Emma returned home later that evening, Mike confronted her immediately. She had just stepped through the door when he blocked her path, his eyes blazing with anger. "Where were you last month?" he demanded. Emma frowned, taken aback by his intensity. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," Mike snapped. "Did you go to the cabin with Jason? The one we stayed at for our anniversary?" Emma's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Answer me!" Mike shouted, his voice shaking. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." Mike felt like the floor had fallen out from beneath him. He stepped back, his chest heaving. "How could you? That place was... It was ours, Emma." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't myself." "You weren't yourself?" Mike echoed bitterly. "That's your excuse? You took him to a place that meant something to us, and you're blaming it on a lapse in judgment?" Emma sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I was wrong, Mike. I was so wrong, and I regret it every single day. Please, you have to believe me. Mike stared at her, his heart a tangle of pain and fury. Why should I believe anything you say? You've lied to me over and over. I'm not lying now, she pleaded. I've told you everything. I swear. For the first time since the affair had come to light, Mike felt the weight of his anger threaten to consume him entirely. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. He drove aimlessly, his mind replaying Jason's words and Emma's tearful confession. The cabin had been their sanctuary, a place where they had celebrated their love. Now it was tainted, another casualty of her betrayal. Mike eventually parked at a nearby overlook, the city lights stretching out before him. He sat there in silence, his emotions boiling over. He had been willing to consider forgiveness, but this revelation felt like the final straw. How could he move forward when every new detail cut deeper than the last? When Mike returned home hours later, the house was dark and silent. Emma was sitting in the living room, her face streaked with tears. She looked up as he entered, her expression a mix of hope and dread. Mike, she began softly, please talk to me. I don't even know what to say anymore, he said, his voice hollow. Every time I think I've heard the worst of it, there's something else. I told you everything, she insisted. There's nothing left to hide. Mike's gaze was cold. That's what you said before. How am I supposed to believe you now? Emma stood, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I know I've lost your trust, but I'm begging you to give me a chance. I'll do anything to fix this. Mike shook his head, his heart heavy. You've broken something that might not be fixable, Emma. And I don't know if I can live with that. Emma's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. That night, Mike slept in the guest room, his thoughts racing as he lay awake. He thought of Lily, of the family they had built, and of the love he and Emma had once shared. Could it really all be over? Or was there still a way to pick up the pieces? The next morning, Mike woke up in the guest room, his body aching from the restless night on the uncomfortable mattress. He stared at the ceiling, his mind still swirling with Jason's revelation and Emma's tearful confession. Each time he thought he had processed the worst of it, another layer of betrayal surfaced. As he got up and dressed, he resolved to focus on Lily for the day. She didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of her parents' crumbling marriage. Downstairs, Lily was eating breakfast, cheerfully chatting with Emma. The sight of them together was jarring. Emma seemed almost normal, smiling at their daughter as if everything was fine. Mike wondered if she was clinging to the illusion of normalcy for Lily's sake or trying to convince herself that their life wasn't unraveling. Daddy? Lily called out, her face lighting up when she saw him. You're eating breakfast with us today? Mike forced a smile and nodded. Yeah, kiddo. Thought I'd join you. Emma glanced at him cautiously, clearly unsure of where they stood. Good morning, she said softly. Mike didn't respond, focusing instead on pouring himself a cup of coffee. He sat down at the table, listening to Lily's excited chatter about her upcoming art project at school. For a moment, the weight of his anger lifted, replaced by the comfort of his daughter's innocence. But the reprieve didn't last long. Later that day, while Lily was at school, Emma approached Mike cautiously. She had been avoiding him since their explosive confrontation the night before, but now she seemed determined to break the silence. Mike, she began, standing in the doorway of his home office. Can we talk? Mike didn't look up from his laptop. What is there left to say? A lot, she said, stepping into the room. I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear me. I love you. And I hate myself for what I did. Mike leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Hating yourself doesn't fix anything, Emma. And it doesn't make it easier for me to live with what you've done. Emma sat down in the chair across from him, her eyes glistening with tears. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I know it's going to take time. But I need to know if you're willing to try. Mike stared at her, his emotions a chaotic mix of anger, hurt, and the faintest glimmer of hope. I don't know, he admitted. Every time I think about what you did, what you took from us, I feel like I'm drowning. Emma reached out as if to touch his hand, then stopped herself. Then let me help you breathe again. Let me prove to you that I'm still the woman you fell in love with. Mike's voice cracked as he responded. I don't even know who you are anymore. That night, Mike decided to talk to Eric again. He needed an outside perspective, someone who wasn't caught up in the emotional storm of his marriage. Eric listened quietly as Mike recounted the latest developments, his expression grim. Man, I'm sorry you're going through this, he said when Mike finished. I can't imagine how hard it must be. It's like every time I think I've hit rock bottom, I find out there's more to the story, Mike said, running a hand through his hair. I want to believe she's telling the truth now, but how can I? Eric nodded thoughtfully. Rebuilding trust is one of the hardest things you can do. But the question is, do you still want to? Or is this the point where you walk away? Mike sighed, leaning back in his chair. That's the thing. I don't know. Part of me wants to fight for our family, for Lily. But another part of me feels like staying would mean letting her get away with what she did. It's not about letting her off the hook, Eric said. It's about figuring out what you want and what you can live with. If you think you can rebuild, then fight for it. But if you know deep down that it's broken beyond repair, then maybe it's time to let go. Mike nodded, though the decision felt no clearer than before. I just don't want to make the wrong choice. There's no perfect answer, man, Eric said. You just have to trust yourself. The next day, Mike returned home with a plan. He would lay everything on the table and see if Emma was truly ready to confront the depth of her betrayal. If she was, maybe there was hope. But if she hesitated, if she faltered even for a moment, he would know it was time to walk away. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Mike sat down with Emma in the living room. She looked at him expectantly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I need to know something, Mike began, his voice steady but firm. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to fix this? No excuses, no half measures. Emma nodded immediately. Yes. I'll do anything, Mike. Just tell me what you need. Mike leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. Then we start with complete transparency. I want access to everything, your phone, your email, every account you've ever used to talk to him. I need to know there's nothing you're hiding. Emma hesitated for the briefest moment, then nodded again. Okay. You can have it all. I have nothing to hide anymore. And therapy, Mike continued. Both individual and couples counseling. No skipping sessions, no excuses. I'll do it, Emma said, her voice trembling. Whatever it takes. Mike studied her for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he nodded. This is your last chance, Emma. If I catch you in another lie, we are done. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, Thank you, Mike. I won't let you down again. But as Mike watched her cry, he couldn't shake the lingering doubt in his heart. Forgiveness might be possible, but forgetting? That felt like a dream too far out of reach. The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act between rebuilding trust and managing the lingering pain. True to her word, Emma gave Mike full access to her phone, emails, and social media accounts. She attended every therapy session, bearing her soul in ways Mike had never seen before. But while her efforts were commendable, Mike couldn't ignore the heavy weight of doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling couples therapy session, their counselor, Dr. Layton, posed a question that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Mike, you've said you're hesitant to forgive Emma because of the depth of her betrayal. But what does forgiveness look like to you? And what would it take for you to get there? Mike shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding Emma's gaze. I don't know, he admitted after a long pause. Forgiveness feels impossible right now. I can't stop thinking about what she did. Every time I look at her, I see Jason, the cabin, all the lies. It's like it's burned into my brain. Emma's face crumpled, but she stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. But, Mike added, his voice softening, I also don't want to throw away everything we've built. I don't want Lily to grow up in a broken home. And I don't want to make a decision I'll regret later. Dr. Layton nodded thoughtfully. It's natural to feel torn. Betrayal creates a wound that takes time to heal, and forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about finding a way to move forward without carrying the weight of anger and resentment. The question is, do you believe Emma is truly committed to earning back your trust? Mike glanced at Emma, who met his gaze with tear-filled eyes. He could see the remorse etched into every line of her face, the weight of her guilt palpable. I think she is, he said finally. But I don't know if that's enough. Later that evening, as they sat together on the back porch, Emma broke the silence. Mike, she said softly, I know I've put you through hell, and I don't expect you to forgive me anytime soon. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Even if it takes years, I'll keep proving to you that I'm committed to this family. Mike stared out at the yard, his thoughts a tangled mess. I want to believe you, he said quietly. But I can't ignore the part of me that feels like trusting you again would be a mistake. Emma reached for his hand, hesitating before her fingers brushed his. I know it's hard. But I hope one day you'll see that I'm not the same person who made those terrible choices. I'm trying to be better, for you, for Lily, and for myself. Mike didn't pull away, but he didn't reciprocate the gesture either. It's going to take time, he said finally. And even then, I can't promise anything. I understand, Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Thank you for not giving up on us completely. The next few months were a slow, painful journey. Therapy sessions continued, and Mike made an effort to be present during their discussions, even when it was emotionally draining. He began to notice small changes in Emma, her willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, her attentiveness to his needs and emotions, and her dedication to making their family whole again. But despite her efforts, the scars of her betrayal remained. There were moments when Mike thought they were making progress, only to be blindsided by a wave of anger or a flashback to the night he had caught her with Jason. Each time, he questioned whether staying was the right choice. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Mike and Emma sat on the couch together. The television played softly in the background, but neither of them was watching. Emma broke the silence. Mike, I need to ask you something, she said, her voice hesitant. Do you still love me? The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mike looked at her, his heart aching with the weight of his conflicting emotions. I don't know, he admitted. I want to. But love isn't enough to fix what happened. I need to feel like I can trust you again. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll keep trying. Even if it takes the rest of my life, I'll keep trying. A few weeks later, Mike made a decision. It wasn't one he arrived at lightly, but after countless sleepless nights and soul-searching, he knew it was the only path forward. During their next therapy session, he turned to Emma and said, I'm willing to keep working on this. But I need you to understand something, this is your last chance. If I ever find out you've lied to me again, we are done. Emma's face crumpled with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Mike. I promise you'll never have a reason to doubt me again. Dr. Layton nodded approvingly. This is a big step, Mike. Rebuilding trust takes time, but it sounds like both of you are committed to the process. The road ahead was uncertain, but Mike was determined to take it one day at a time. He didn't know if their marriage would ever return to what it once was, but for now, he was willing to try. And in a world where betrayal had once seemed insurmountable, that felt like a victory in itself.